Welcome to my channel, MS is Great. In this video, we're going to see how to create encryption and decryption using custom connectors and how to consume that in Power Automate. This sample requires C# knowledge and a basic knowledge of the custom connectors. For the basic how to create custom connectors using the Power Automate, refer to my other video. I posted the video in the description, so you can refer to that for a basic custom connectors. This is the far advanced topic of the custom connector, which involves more of a C# programming and few of the JSON skills. So you should be prepared for the programming. Let's start creating the custom connectors is for the encryption and decryption. So in this example, we're going to use the triple DES algorithm for encryption and decryption. For more information about the triple DES algorithm and details on encrypting the string, you can use this website. I'm using this website to encrypt and then test the decryption. The same algorithm I would apply in the custom connector and check the string for encryption and decryption. If you take the triple DES encryption, you need to mention the Kefir mode, which is the CBC mode by default, and this is optional, and again IV optional, and we're going to make it as a parameter or supply the fixed IV for now. And the secret key is mandatory, and we need to have a mandatory secret key which we get it as a parameter within our custom connector, and finally we get the output, whether the encrypted text or the decrypted text. Let's start creating the custom connector. So for creating a custom connector, we just follow the same, create from the blank. I'm going to do encryption, or I just say security utilities. Security utilities, and you can upload any of the images for the icon. So I'm just going to leave it blank, and we should provide some description for the encryption and decryption. And what we're going to do is that we're going to use this as a description. You can have any descriptions, and the host, which is mandatory. So for now I'm just using the same MS is Great. We don't need any authentication because it is just a function in C#. So here I'm going to add two actions, one for encrypting text and another for decrypting the text. So let's add the first action, which is decrypt text. I'm going to call that as a decrypt text, and we can have the same here, decrypt the text, and then some description about what is the algorithm it uses to decrypt, which using the same key. And then here we are going to fix the key size, which is 256. So that is not as a parameter, it will be a part of the code. And as usual, you should import add a default request, the response. So request, we should have some URL. So what I'm going to have is some URL for the request, https msisgreat / decrypt. Since we're going to have more than one actions, it's better to have a proper URL path, and I'm going to add the JSON body. So JSON body is where the input parameter comes in. So here I'm going to take two parameters, one the private key and the text to encrypt. So let's have the private key, which is a string, and text to decrypt. Okay, and this is also a string. Text to decrypt, correct. Okay, these two are the parameters which I'm going to pass. Let me import it, and let's have the body. I need to make sure that private key is mandatory, and let's have this as private key, and default, there is no default for private key, must be 32 characters long. Why? Because 256, we enforcing the key to be 256, so we should have 32 characters long. So let me use this private key, and then default, it's required, it is a string, and it is disabled, correct. Let's go back and then make this also as mandatory text. Let me put this default value is empty, this is mandatory as well. Text to decrypt, yeah, that is mandatory as well. So we're going to make that as mandatory also, and let me give a proper description here. Okay, done. Let me go back. This is done. Let's go to AI plugin. So before going to AI plugin, I'm going to add another method, which is the encrypt text. Okay, encrypt text. So this one will encrypt, the other action will decrypt. So right now we have two operations, so two operations should be there. So let's encrypt, and the same post request here I'm going to /encrypt. Okay, so the path should have a unique path. Make sure that the path is unique. Don't specify the same path as the decrypt, then you will have error. And the parameter here, it's going to have two parameters, the same private key, and then let me have a private key, because it has to use the same key which is encrypted, which is used to encrypt, and private key, and also it requires the text to encrypt. Let me have text to encrypt. This is also a string. Okay, so I'm going to import this so that you have two parameters coming in, and I'm going to make that as mandatory. So text to encrypt title, we can make that text to encrypt title, and then description can be like original text, and the default value nothing, and I'm going to make it required. Okay, so this is the parameter to get the value, and private key, I'm going to use some default, move it here, private key. Okay, and I'm going to make this also to be required. So these two are the parameters for the encryption, and let's go back. So there are two parameters, private key and text to encrypt, and we have two actions which are all been defined, and make sure that it is green. So now we are ready for the next stage. We don't need any AI plugin. Next, go to the code and enable the code. Make sure you select both the encryption and decryption. So now this is the code, which is the default code which comes in. I'm going to remove this code. Let me make sure the window is a bit bigger window for you to see. Okay, so I'm removing the default code. The first step on the code which you should do is that we should we have two actions in here, and both the action is, whenever the action is executed from the Power Automate, it is going to call or execute this same class. So the execute async is common for all the actions. So you need to filter out what is the action which you're going to prepare, and then based on the action or the operation ID, you will have to call the relevant method. So that is the very important step which you should remember. So later I show you in the code, you would have understanding. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to start building a code one by one and then explain you what is the code logic does. So first what I'm doing is that I'm going to have a fixed IV. So for this is a sample code. If you're doing a original code, better to have another parameter to get the IV text. IV is nothing but for the triple test algorithm, it makes sure that all the block is kind of randomized, and it is very difficult to decrypt or crack the encryption. So that is more about the IV text. I'm just going to make that as a fixed for now. In your original production, you should not be doing that. This is more of a class level. Sorry, so I need to move it to class level, because this is the one which is going to be used in all the functions. This is a typical C# programming. You should have a fair understanding of the C# programming before you start doing it. And again, let's create a switch case and then let's do that. So as I mentioned you before, this method execute async is called by all the actions which you define in the Power Automate in the custom connector. So you need to add your own logic. So for that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use the switch operation, this dot context dot operation ID. Okay, so this dot context gives you so many of the properties. One of the properties is the operation ID. So based on the operation ID, we're going to call a different action. We have two operations in our code, which is, we do encrypt text. Okay, encrypt text is one of the operation. Let me add the break. And the another operation is decrypt text, and let me add the break. This is mandatory, and you should be knowing that switch case supports default. Why? Because if any of this operation has been not been executed, then automatically we want to throw some error saying that the operation is not supported. So what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to add some HTTP response which tells you that it is a bad response. So just create a bad request, because the operation is not supported. So I'm going to create a bad request, not response, and pass some meaningful text. So this is done. So now we're going to build up this encrypt text and the decrypt text. So this is a typical C# programming. You can create private functions, any number of private functions, and then call within the class. So think of like a class, and then you can execute the operations within the class. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to create one more function, which is a private sync. Let me tell you, sync. Okay, so this is the encrypt text method, and then I'm going to add one more. Okay, I have one additional, which is decrypt text. Okay, decrypt text. So So these two are the private functions which I'm going to create for encryption and decryption logic. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to call this method within here. So to call the method, you should follow this approach. Encrypt text. Okay, encrypt text. So you should this is an asynchronous function. You should have always the await and call the function and configure await or false. So this is the default property or the method you should call. Then I do the same for decryption. Okay, so now the skeleton is ready. We have a switch function that will switch accordingly based on the operation, and it will execute this functions, the private functions. So now we need to add the logic to encrypt and also the logic to decrypt the function, decrypt the text. So for that I'm going to use the triple dash algorithm. I already have a code. Then I will just make use of the code and then explain you what the code does. That's much easier. We cannot be typing in very long code here. Okay, so this is the code for encryption. So basically what I'm doing is that I'm the same logic, which is like this dot context dot request gives you the request parameters, which is in the JSON format. We declared a body, remember, with 2 parameters. So we are going to get that as a string and convert that into a JSON object, and then read the JSON object, which is those 2 properties, the private key and the text to encrypt. So once you get that character, see here, I'm hard coding it to 256 key. The key size is fixed. Private key is being passed, and AES IV text is hard coded again here, and there is a code for encryption. This is a default C# code which you can do. And finally, everything is saved in the encrypted text. I'm just going to use this method to send a response, which is OK response, and a string content. Similarly, I'm going to add a code for decryption. It's a reverse operation. So again, you need to get the parameters and then just pass it here. Let me add the decryption. So the decryption is being added here, and it's the same. You need to first get the context.request, will get you the request, which is the JSON body text which we created, and read the JSON, get the text to decrypt and 2 parameters. Again, it is a reverse operation, so you just do the decryption logic and then just return the decrypted value, which has been passed or returned here. So our code is ready. Let's test this code. To test the connector, you should really create the connection and create the connector first. So I'm going to create the connector. When you click on the connector, then the whole compilation and then the Power Automate or the custom connector tool will start building the connectors, and it will make available for you. Okay, successfully created the connector. To test the connector, we need to have a connection. So let me create the connection first. So the connection has been successfully created. You can see here. So now we're going to test the custom connector. Let's start with the encrypt text action. So to encrypt a text, you need a private key and sample text which you want to encrypt. Let's get some private key. So I just got this private key. Make sure that this is 32 character long so that it adheres to the 256 key size. And the text to encrypt, I'm just using MS is great. Let's test this operation. Okay, you can see here it is successful and I'm getting this text. Now we're going to check this value against the website which we have used it. Let's see here. So this is the website where it gives you the option to do the encryption and decryption. MS is great. CBC, and then enter the, so I'm going to change the key size to 256, and my IV text is this one. This is the text. You can see in the code we hard coded it, and the key which we used is the private key secret, and then I'm going to encrypt. Okay, so this is the text which we get it in the, so hopefully we get the same thing. Okay, you can see here slightly, I'll just, okay, you can see here, so both are same, meaning that encryption is working for, I mean it is the same algorithm with the same private key and the IV text and the text to pass, the algorithm, it works. Okay, so let's test the decryption. So let me copy this. Let's go to decrypt text. So for decryption you need the text which is encrypted, and the private key should be the same key, exactly the same key which should match, and when you click on the test operation we should get MS is great. Okay, so it is decrypted. So you can see here encryption and decryption is working, and let's see how to use it in our Power Automate. Let's close this. We have successfully created. I'm going to use this in the Power Automate. So let's go to my flow. We create a new flow. Can be like security YouTube. And I'm going to create a new flow from the scratch, which is a manually triggered flow. Let me remove this. We need to add the action which we have. Security, let's filter by the custom. So we have it here. Let's add encrypt text. So encrypt text is the one which we created. Show all. You can see here all the description is appearing here. That's a description we added, and the original text to encrypt. So all these are there already. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to add this private key and then the original text. This is great, and together I want to test the same decryption. So I can add security decryption, decrypt the text. So for decrypting the text, it takes two parameters. Private key is the same, which we have to use the same, and the text, I would pass the text from the encrypted text, and that's it. So basically whatever it is encrypted, it is passed to the decryption. Okay, and finally what I'm going to do is that just to make sure things are okay, or at least we can see it in the output. So I'm just going to add a compose method which gets the decrypted text and save it in here. Okay, so this is a very simple Power Automate which we have created. It will encrypt, decrypt the same, and then just show the decrypted text here. Save the Power Automate and then try to test it. So now successfully saved. Let me test this one. It's a manual flow, so we are going to test it manually. Let's continue and then run the flow. Done. So successfully run. Encrypted text. Let's see what is the encrypted text here. So basically these are the input. I passed the private key and MS is great. And let's see the output. Okay, see here, this is the output from the execution. The same output is passed as an input to this. You can see here, this is the input to the decryption. It has done, and then it is decrypted, and the decrypted text is here. Okay, so this is how you do the encryption and decryption within the Power Automate. It has so many of the, this custom connector has so many application to it. So especially when you want to encrypt certain text and then append it to the URL and pass it as an URL, get the value from the URL and decrypt it. So it has it doesn't have by default within the Power Automate. So we can create our own custom connector to do the encryption and decryption. Hope this is really helpful. Subscribe and like. Thank you.